The military has been forced by foolish and reckless politicians to focus on the wrong things. In many ways, this speech is about fixing decades of decay. Some of it obvious, some of it hidden. Or as the chairman has put it, we are clearing out the debris, removing the distractions, clearing the way for leaders to be leaders. You might say we're ending the war on warriors. I heard someone wrote a book about that.
Combat tested and respected members of the U.S. Armed Forces, General Christopher Donahue, is retiring early, forced out by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. At just 56, General Donahue, a former Delta Force commander, had been expected to serve for years to come. Instead, he's now one of more than a dozen senior officers recently shown the door. Face the Nation moderator and chief foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan joins us now with more. Margaret, great to have you here. What's this all about?
Well, Tony, this may be one of the most remarkable purges to date because of how exemplary this particular four-star general's career has been. According to one U.S. official, Hegseth himself told General Donahue he needs to retire by the end of the summer, and Donahue has, we've confirmed, handed in his retirement papers, even though there was this behind-the-scenes effort by some on Capitol Hill for more than a month now to try to salvage his career. The Pentagon explains it as a push to shrink the number of generals and admirals, but multiple sources told CBS this appears to be an effort to squeeze out officers in favor of political loyalists, and that is significant because the military is supposed to be apolitical.
It's very significant. Was there any friction between Hegseth and Donahue?
On the face of it, Donahue would appear to be the kind of warrior leader Hegseth says that he wants, and officials deny to us any personal clash or any conflict. They say the two men only ever met once. In fact, here's a photo of it. He was famously the last U.S. soldier to leave Afghanistan and one of the first to help in Ukraine, but Donahue's support role in that chaotic exit from Afghanistan back in 2021 may have made him a target. Hegseth is conducting his own new review of that withdrawal, and he's expected to take action, perhaps against senior officers who executed that pullout ordered by the last president. It's also happening as the administration reviews the size of America's military footprint in Europe, where Donahue is the top Army commander.
Hello, Bobby Jones here for MeidasTouch and Valor Media Networks. So the clip you just saw was one of Pete Hegseth talking about how the war on warriors has now ended since he's become Secretary of Defense, or as he likes to call himself, the Secretary of War. And then another clip, the most recent firing of an actual warrior in a four-star position in the United States military. What Pete Hegseth described as his war on woke has been the exact opposite. The very people he is said to value, the very type of leaders that he says he wants, he has fired in droves. Pete Hegseth has declared a war on warriors, and I'm going to explain how. Since coming into office, it's been very clear that Pete Hegseth wants a certain type of general or admiral to lead the Department of Defense. Now, at first, people said, well, you know, a new administration, he can hire whoever he wants. And it's obvious that he wants a certain type of leader, one that looks very much like him. But at the same time, he should be looking for warrior leaders, as he puts it. Well, let's take a look at the firings of the people that he has removed. But most importantly, forget their educational background and their command experience. Let's look at the actual combat records of these leaders. Let's start with General Brown, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, only the second African-American to hold that position after General Colin Powell did in the 90s. Now, yes, he's a four-star Air Force general, but specifically, he flew actual combat missions in Desert Storm, Southern Watch, Enduring Freedom, and Iraqi Freedom. He oversaw operations against ISIS in 2015 and 2016, and then had to eject from an F-16 in a training emergency. So he understands the risk of every time he got in a cockpit, how dangerous it was. So a distinguished combat record, being the actual point of the spear, as people like to say, and then overseeing other combat operations. Let's look at Admiral Lisa Franchetti, who he also had removed. Career surface warfare officer. Now, she was the head of the United States Navy, and the biggest thing that Hegseth said against her was she had no actual combat experience. However, when she was in charge of the United States Navy, two major things. In combat, the ships that came under Houthi fire in the Red Sea, those ships were manned, trained, and equipped to actually execute the mission, and not one ship was touched. And while doing all that, making sure that the Navy hit its highest state of readiness in decades, she also met every recruitment goal that the Navy had set out, 100% recruitment consistently, which had not happened for years. So not only was she creating an environment where her sailors could perform, she was also bringing in the next generation of sailors fully manned and ready to roll. This continues into the Army. General George, who was fired as the chief of staff for the Army during the Iran War, 101st Airborne Division, Operation Desert Storm, multiple Iraq War deployments, and then commanded the 4th Brigade Combat Team in Afghanistan during Operation Enduring Freedom. The man was a soldier's soldier. You cannot find anybody to say anything negative about him. And many defense officials, high-ranking, both military and civilian, were absolutely shocked by his removal, especially when it happened. To quote one defense official, they said, here's a 4-star general actively working to get equipment into theater, and you fire him in the middle of a war? That's how shocked people were. But this is because Hegseth doesn't want warriors. Hegseth wants lackeys. When you look at the fact that Admiral Alvin Halsey was also basically forced to retire for U.S. Southern Command. Why? Because he refused to violate international law when it comes to the conduct of war, and just shooting and striking and sinking ships in the Caribbean and the Pacific without proper justification and going through proper protocols for it. He said no. Once again, a combat leader, thousands of hours of flying in the most dangerous areas in the world. Again, exactly what Hegseth said he wanted. Again, removed because he was not compliant enough to do the things that they wanted him to do, even if they were illegal, which leads to the latest firing, a man who literally is supposed to be everything that Hegseth wants. General Donahue, the last man to leave Afghanistan, famously boarding his aircraft to make sure every American had gotten out. A West Point graduate, 20 plus years in special operations. The man led Delta Force. Delta Force is like the Avengers of the United States military. The most badass people put in the hardest circumstances, doing the hardest things. Over 18 total combat deployments. He commanded the 82nd Airborne Division, which is revered for what it does. And what happens? He gets told to retire, to fire, because of the fact that he was associated with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, even though he was doing what he was ordered to do, and for the fact that Hegseth doesn't know if he's loyal enough to him and Donald Trump. It's that simple. So what we're seeing is a concentrated effort to remove competency, the actual warrior ethos that Hegseth talks about, for political lackeys. Report after report after report says that they want the generals and admirals of the United States military to be basically political appointees that lack the combat experience that 20 years of Afghanistan and Iraq actually gave them, that lack the actual esprit de corps of the people they lead. No, they want loyalists. And how's that working out? When you look at what's happening around the world, the politicians of the United States putting the military in very, very bad positions, being led by people who are no longer the most competent, and you get the Iran fiasco. At the end of the day, the only war that Hegseth is winning is destroying the ethos of the American military that made it such a force going on 250 years. And that is a shame.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.